Franchising made simple.
Welcome to the latest episode of Fran Simple, the podcast designed to make the concepts of franchising simple. I'm your host, Mark Vandergrift, and with me is the president of FranSource, an all-time expert on franchising, and my franchise brother, Steve Vandergrift. Steve, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to join you again.
So we have a lot of developments in franchising right now, but one of the topics that we want to cover is just what makes for an ideal franchisee, right? And in these developments, we're seeing growth in the franchise industry. You wrote a blog article on what the summer of 2026 looks like in terms of forecasting. And last time we covered what makes for a great franchisor. So I want to cover this time this idea of the ideal franchisee. Now that makes it sound like it's some kind of mystical model and everybody has to be in the same mold, but it's not really that. There's traits that we can track. And I think one of the reasons our listeners will be interested in that, a lot of franchisors are listening and they have to do all the vetting because they're bringing folks into their organization that may or may not be ideal franchisees. And so I think that's what we want to cover today.
Sure.
I know when we were, you had your franchise system and I was intimately involved with that. We had, let's call them not so great franchisees, and we had some really great franchisees. And I can tell you, we didn't put them into a personality mold. It's kind of, a challenge to vet. But you were in your early 30s, I was in my late 20s, and we're not that anymore. So we've learned a lot about, after your 30 years of experience setting up franchise systems, really kind of a much more targeted trait.
Yes.
So before we, get into that, let's talk about a few of the things that you're seeing in the franchise industry that might be developments since our last episode.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the IFA's 2026 Franchising Economic Outlook Report. And the great news is franchising definitely continues to be incredibly strong and continues to grow. Just a few data points. The number of franchise units are projected to grow this year by approximately from 832,500 to 845,000 units, and that's an increase of 1.5%. Employment-wise, franchise employment is expected to increase by more than 150,000 jobs to nearly 8.9 million jobs. That's an increase of 1.8%. In terms of output, franchise output is expected to rise from a little over 907 billion to 921.4 billion. That's an increase of 1.6%. And total franchise gross domestic product is estimated to grow approximately 1.8% from 550 billion approximately to 558.4 billion. So that's massive, and it continues to perform like this every year that we're seeing. And what's especially interesting to me is that we're seeing growth across a variety of different sectors. Home services, health and wellness, quick service restaurants, senior care, and even business services. But we know that growth also creates competition. So the brands that are really winning right now, they're the ones with strong leadership, strong systems, and franchisees who are engaged operators. That's a great combination right there.
Awesome. So we see the industry growing. That's good news for, I think, our economy, right?
Yes.
Because it tends to be a much faster growth pattern. And then we have just the jobs that it creates and all of that follows along with it. So we're excited just to see it from an economic perspective. Let's dig into the ideal franchisees now. Okay. Again, this isn't a set mold, but it's kind of a good list as a litmus test, right? When we're thinking about traits, it's nice to have a checklist, and maybe people that hit that checklist tend to work out well. It'd be nice to be able to take one of those personality exams and just say, I need everybody that's a blank type of personality. We do the DISC assessment here. And one of
Right.
the things we find out is that we need every personality type. So you can't, use this as a hard and fast rule.
That's
But
right.
why don't you start out? Give us some traits that you've seen over the year that successful franchisees tend to have.
And you say it exactly right. They're traits. And as you mentioned, people are different. People have different personalities, and that's okay. But there are traits that really lead to being a great franchisee. And first and foremost, I think, is coachability. It's huge. Franchising works because systems already exist. So the best franchisees are willing to follow the franchisor's proven system and processes instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. That doesn't mean they can't bring creativity to the table. I call it innovation at the franchisee level. An example of that is McDonald's fish fillet. I've been sharing this story for years. It was proposed by a franchisee decades ago, and it's still on the menu today. But successful franchisees understand the importance, the value of consistency throughout the franchise network. So that coachability is just a huge, huge part.
Good. Well, one of the things I always think about in considering a franchise system in the past, even for my own, like, would I want to buy into this? And I
Hmm.
think, would I make a good franchisee? And I think, well, I've been a business owner before, but there's a lot of folks that are coming out of middle management. Like maybe they've been downsized, but they have good savings. And they're like, you know what? I'm ready to be my own boss, but they've never owned a business before. Uh, First question, and let's call this a two-part question. Do franchisees need prior business ownership experience to be successful? And then maybe if the answer is it helps or no, you don't need that, what are some other important traits that relate to business understanding? Maybe it's balance sheets, how to read, an income statement, an expense report, stuff like that. Give us some ideas around that.
Well, truth be told, having previous business experience is not necessarily critical. Some of the best franchisees we've seen, they come from a multitude different corporate careers, military backgrounds. Veterans make great franchisees. Healthcare, education, really, it's all kinds of industries that they're coming from. What matters most in my mind is the mindset and the overall personality. In other words, having a positive attitude and personality, a strong work ethic, a passion for the brand. I consider that a very important aspect. Accountability, and then certainly having leadership and team building skills. And then the final one would be a willingness to learn and follow this system. All of that typically matters much more than someone having previous business experience.
Okay. Well, in that vein, what are some common misconceptions that you see about franchise
Mm.
ownership? So, this idea that I'm a prospective franchisee, and what misconceptions might I have in regard to buying into a franchise system if I've never been a franchisee before?
I think one big misconception is that franchising is passive income. Even with a great system, franchise ownership really does require dedication and engagement, especially early on. Even in the case of a semi absentee owner, they need to have that oversight. I think another misconception is that success is automatic because the brand already exists and it appears to be successful. I like to say that a franchisor, however, provides the vehicle and the roadmap, but the franchisee has to supply the fuel, which is their passion, their dedication, their commitment, and of course, their capital. So, execution by the franchisee obviously matters a great deal.
Well, you mentioned a little bit about the business background, and it's not critical or anything like that. But there's also the component of financial responsibility or discipline.
Mm.
How important is that, would you say? And let me rephrase this. How important is financial discipline for franchisees?
It's very important. I mean, successful franchisees, they need to understand budgeting, cash flow, and operational efficiencies. They don't need to be a CPA, but they need to understand the numbers. Financial understanding and discipline often are the difference between surviving or thriving.
Would you, in the case of someone that's more entrepreneurial, um, a lot of times they like to, swerve and do their own thing, and they don't necessarily attach themselves to financial performance. If you didn't have that financial discipline, what's a recommendation you might make to maybe getting someone else to complement that, or um,
No, that's
going
exactly
back
it,
to a
Mark.
class?
The reality is, in those situations, first of all, it's always wise to, if you lack in something like the financial aspects, then work with an accountant, work with the CPA. You'll learn a lot through that process, and eventually probably not need them as much. But you seek people who understand things that maybe you don't understand as well, and that can be a critical success aspect.
Do you think another area, do you think, and entrepreneurs are hard to follow, right? Their mind is a little bit different. What role in this regard do leadership and people skills play? And can you complement those in a similar question? Can you complement those with maybe the people that surround you?
Well, there's no question about that. Surround yourself with people that better you than you at certain things, more knowledgeable, etc. But leadership and people skills, they play a huge role in any successful business. I mean, ultimately, franchising is about people and the employees, the customers or clients, the vendors, the community relationships. So, franchisees who build strong teams and they create positive cultures tend to perform extremely well. Emotional intelligence, I like to say, matters more than people sometimes realize. Being
Yeah,
comfortable with your
the EQ, the emotional quotient, as they say these days, is so critical. Do you
yes.
think, w- with all the franchisees you've seen, do
Hmm.
you think that, and I know we talk about changing employees or changing people, changing spouses, right? Like somehow we can impact changing people. Do
Right.
you think that these traits are something people are born with, or can they actually be developed within a franchisee?
Well, they certainly can be developed. I mean, very few people start as a perfect operator or leader. Franchising can strengthen leadership and operational skills through mentorship, coaching, and strategic planning. And franchisors, great franchisors, they're good at providing that. And franchisees can certainly improve their financial literacy, their management and team leading skills, and even their communication abilities. Getting into a franchise system, there's that peer collaboration. You're going to learn from other franchise owners within your system. And so, yes, I definitely believe they can be developed.
We, we know from our own family that hard work is just ingrained in us, and that's really an important aspect. If I were a franchisor now, and I'm trying to develop a list that says what's in my ideal franchisee, what um, what do you think's the possibility that you can measure hard work from someone? Does it just really take kind of a in-depth interview? Is this something you get to know somebody through Discovery Day? Um, are there questions that can be asked that would help get that sense of hard work and some of the attributes or traits that you listed today?
That's a great question. I mean, ultimately, I believe the great franchisors, they have great franchise sales processes. They have a system in place. And it's all designed to be able to determine, is that individual or individuals going to be a good fit? And so having a system, working with a good franchise consultant that can talk you through that and help you develop that system, you're going to be able to pre-qualify, then qualify through that process. So coming out the other side, you should be able to ascertain some of the traits we're talking about here, and even the hard working aspect of it. We develop, as an example, an interview questionnaire that can be conducted with prospective franchisees during Discovery Day visits for our clients. And so through that process, they can have a number of team members spend 10 or 15 minutes with the individual, go through that questionnaire with them, ask additional questions that come up as a result of the response from that prospective franchisee. So, yes, I mean, again, having a good system is so critical. Otherwise, you're just granting franchises. You're not qualifying franchises. And those systems, they might start to grow very rapidly, but oftentimes we see the downturn. They sell 50 franchises one year and only 10 open the next year. And so, again, it all comes back to having a robust franchise sales process system.
In business, I mentioned earlier that we're allowed to give personality
Hmm.
tests to prospective employees or existing employees for that matter. Is there anything in the world of franchising that has franchise laws or anything? If someone likes to operate by a personality test like this, um, is that allowed to be applied at some point during that sales process?
Oh, most certainly. And, we have clients that do love that aspect. Even franchise broker organizations, some of them, when they're recruiting prospective franchisees, they'll actually do a personality test as well. So, yes, they can be incorporated into the franchise sales process.
Are there any skills assessments that are applied as well? Like beyond personality, are you allowed to test for technology? I mean, are there limits to platforms that can be used to test? Like, I mean, let's say it was a platform or a franchise concept that had to do with coding, right? Web
Hmm.
programming or something. We give tests here for prospective developers that
Hmm.
is just a basic assessment test. Are there any legal restrictions as to what you can test for?
Not at all. Very similar to what you take an employee through. You can
Okay.
implement that within a franchise system as well. So there's really not a limitation. And in some concepts, I would think it's critical that they do have those quote unquote tests. You want to make sure it's a great fit for that franchisee and a great fit for the franchisor as well.
Yeah, I could see where you could turn people away if you gave them a litany of tests. But I also think there's a balance there that says, hey, these people they really care and they're vetting,
That's right.
things that go beyond just an interview process. Do you see that that would add some credibility to the franchisor's interview process?
I think prospective franchisees, those that are serious about becoming a business owner and a franchisee within a system, they appreciate knowing that the franchisor is truly qualifying. It's not qualifying them. It's not just they have a check, they have some type of, corporate job background. So yes, I mean it really gets into that level sometimes. They'd
Have you ever
like to
seen
know that they're being qualified.
Okay. Have you ever seen a franchisor use a third party, not just a test, but an organization where there's interviews involved and it's almost like a psychological run through? I don't want to scare anyone away. I'm just wondering if you've seen any franchise systems or franchisors use that in the past.
I don't see that much. It's usually internal rather than external. Now, again, there's going to be certain concepts that might make sense, but again, it's based upon your business. What are you operating, and how critical would it be to have that type of due diligence on a prospective franchisee? But we don't see it a lot.
So you would say the closest thing to that is the broker system where they're kind of vetting prospective franchisees before they introduce them to the
Sure.
franchisor. Is
I
that
mean,
the
they're somewhat, yes, they're somewhat of a third party. And so they're doing their own due diligence to help direct, and the best franchise consultants or brokers, they really do want to get that individual with the right systems and the right fit for them. And so there is some level of that due diligence even before the franchisor is now following up with that franchise consultant or franchise clients and actually walking them through the process. So they have that benchmark from the broker organization themselves.
that's good insight. So let's go over to the franchisee side of things because we've talked
Hmm.
about how the franchisor can kind of vet a franchisee. Let's talk to the franchisees on our list as our listeners. What advice would you give someone that's considering becoming a franchisee?
Well, I would say first of all, focus on really preparing and what's the alignment with the franchisor? Is it the type of business that you really would excel at? And, they can ask themselves, a prospective franchisee could ask themselves a number of questions. First of all, do I understand the commitment and what it takes to become a successful business owner? Am I willing to follow the franchisor system? That's critical. Pure entrepreneurs, they can, what someone who loves to create, they can be good franchisees. But to your point, a lot of times they want to make changes and changes and changes. And you have to understand that the system is the system because it's successful. Another one that relates is, do they communicate well? It's vitally important that the franchisee and franchisor are both good communicators. Is the franchisee prepared to lead a team? Do they like the idea of recruiting, training, retaining employees? Do they feel that's a skill set of theirs? Do they have the ability to successfully recruit, train, motivate? And again, such a critical aspect for most franchise systems because you're going to have team members. And also, do I have a passion for the products or services in the brand itself? People do best when they're passionate about what they're doing. And we could probably devote an entire episode to this, quite truthfully, but I'll end with this. Prospective franchisees shouldn't rush the process of identifying the right opportunity. Take their time. The strongest franchise relationships happen when both the franchisee and the franchisor are aligned in values and expectations. And so there needs to be that clarity to make that relationship work.
Yeah, I love the idea of communication. We've seen it so often that a franchisee sometimes enters the relationship almost like an employee to a boss, and there's like
Mm,
this natural friction, like, I don't know if I can trust them. They're just trying to make money off me, whatever. I guess my personal recommendation is, if you're a franchisee, walk into the relationship with a trusting nature, and
critical.
try to inculcate good communication with the franchisor. And if you don't feel that connection, then maybe it's, move on to something else, because you're almost, well, I could say you're pretty much marrying that franchisor, right? And whoever
Yes.
the contact is there.
No, that's
So,
very, very true.
yeah, I mean, you have to feel a good rapport, and you have to have trust, because if you don't, then you're always going to be questioning the decisions that they make. You're going to assume that they don't have your best interest at heart. It's all about the franchise system or the franchisor. At the same time, though, as a franchisee, don't think that you can't question things.
That's
That's
right.
the heart of a good relationship.
It's communication.
So,
That's exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah, good. Well, we're going to wrap it up here, but as I always do, what's that one key thing that you want to have our listeners take away from today's conversation? What would that be today, Steve?
Well, as I shared in our previous episode, franchising isn't just about the brand, it's also about people. So strong systems matter, but the real success stories come from franchisors and franchisees who trust each other, as we said, communicate well, and they stay committed to continuous evaluation and improvement. Franchisors, they welcome great ones, they welcome input. Franchisees have to trust, ultimately, though, what the decision is. It might be an idea that doesn't fit the brand. So, again, that communication and trust is so vital. Make sure you
Very
have it
good.
when you're looking at a franchise concept with that franchisor.
Awesome. Well, as always, great questions, great answers. Um, just appreciate you being on again today. And for our listeners, we want to thank you for joining us. Let's wrap up the episode this episode of Free and Simple. And as always, please share, please subscribe to Free and Simple, the podcast designed to make the concepts of franchising simple. And until next episode, may your business expand through the power of franchising.